He was once the face of rebellion, the man who turned chaos into rhythm and made the world believe rock and roll would never age. But at 82, Mick Jagger is no longer the untouchable force people remember from stadium lights and screaming crowds. Now, the silence between performances feels heavier than the applause ever did. Because the real story isn't that he survived fame, it's that fame survived him. And what it cost along the way is far more unsettling than most people realize. Long before the millions, the tours, and the mythology, he was just a restless boy in Dartford, a student who didn't quite fit into structure, discipline, or the quiet expectations of a normal English life. While others followed predictable paths, he was drawn to something he couldn't yet name: rhythm, movement, sound that felt like it came from somewhere outside the world he knew. Then came the meeting that changed everything. A chance encounter with Keith Richards on a train platform, two old-school acquaintances reconnecting by accident, both carrying something that didn't belong in their environment. American blues records, Muddy Waters, Chuck Berry, music that felt illegal in post-war England. That moment didn't look special at the time, but it became the starting point of a cultural earthquake. Because once Mick and Keith started playing together, something irreversible began. Not just a band, but a shift in how youth, identity, and rebellion would be expressed for generations. The Rolling Stones didn't arrive politely, they didn't ask for permission, they entered like a contradiction to everything polished and safe in the 1960s music scene. While other bands were clean-cut and marketable, the Stones felt dangerous, unfiltered, almost uncomfortable to look at. And at the center of that discomfort was Mick Jagger himself. Not just singing, but moving in a way that people hadn't seen before. Not belonging to any class, any rulebook, any expectation. He wasn't trying to be liked, he was trying to be felt. And it worked. By the mid-60s, the world didn't just know the Rolling Stones, it reacted to them. But what the audience didn't see was how quickly that intensity began to reshape the people inside it. Success didn't arrive as celebration, it arrived as pressure, as exhaustion, as a life that no longer had normal boundaries. And slowly, the first cracks started to show. One of the earliest was Brian Jones, the band's original leader and musical architect, a man whose talent helped build the Stones, but who slowly found himself being pushed out of the very identity he created. The rise of Mick and Keith as the creative core left him displaced, unstable, and increasingly isolated. By 1969, he was gone from the band. Not long after, he was gone from life entirely. And for Mick, still young at the time, it was the first quiet lesson that fame doesn't just elevate people, it also replaces them. But the machine kept moving, hit records, tours, global recognition, stadiums filled with noise so loud it almost erased the personal cost behind it. Because while the world saw swagger, what was building underneath was something far more complicated. A life that never stopped moving long enough to process what it was losing. Relationships came and went like chapters written too quickly to fully understand. Love stories formed in the middle of chaos and collapsed under the weight of distance, attention, and absence. Marianne Faithfull, Bianca Jagger, Jerry Hall. Each relationship carrying its own version of the same pattern. Intensity at the beginning, distance in the middle, separation at the end. Not because of lack of feeling, but because fame does not pause for intimacy, it interrupts it. And that interruption became a lifelong rhythm. Even when success reached its peak, there was always something slipping through the cracks. A cost that didn't show up in awards or ticket sales, but in moments that could never be recovered. Birthdays missed, conversations shortened, years passing in motion instead of presence, and still the world only saw the performance. The real breaking points often happened away from it. In 2014, when Lauren Scott, his longtime partner, died unexpectedly, something in that pattern stopped being abstract. For the first time, the loss wasn't part of the background noise of fame. It was personal, immediate, unavoidable. Those close to him described a version of Mick that didn't belong on stage. Not energetic, not controlled, just still. And stillness, for someone who had built a life on movement, was unfamiliar. But even that grief eventually had to exist alongside performance. Because the tour didn't disappear, the audience didn't disappear, the machine continued. And so he returned to it, not healed, not unchanged, but functioning. Then came 2019. The body, after decades of surviving punishment disguised as performance, finally issued its warning. A failing heart valve, not metaphorical, not symbolic, physical, real enough to stop a world tour. At 75, he was forced into surgery that placed his life into the hands of modern medicine, a replacement valve, a repaired system. A reminder that even legends are biological. For a moment, everything paused, and in that pause, something unexpected surfaced. Without the stage, without the noise, without the identity of performance, there was just a man sitting with time. Time he had spent decades outrunning. Time that was now impossible to ignore. When recovery began, it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It was slow, controlled, rebuilding a body that had been pushed far beyond what it was designed to sustain. And then, against expectation, he returned. Not cautiously, not partially, but fully. Back on stage in Chicago, moving again in front of tens of thousands of people as if the interruption had never happened. But something had changed. Not in ability, in awareness. Because after you are forced to stop, even briefly, you don't return to the same relationship with motion. You understand its limits differently. And that changes everything quietly, without announcement. Now at 82, Mick Jagger exists in a strange balance between two realities. On stage, he still becomes the figure the world remembers, the energy, the movement, the performance that refuses to fully age. But off stage, there is something far quieter. A life built around recovery, routine, discipline, and the awareness that every performance now exists on borrowed momentum. Even fatherhood feels different in this chapter. Less about distance, more about presence. Less about what was missed, more about what is still possible in the time remaining. And maybe that is the most unexpected turn in his entire story. Not fame, not collapse, not survival, but the slow realization that the most valuable part of life was never the stage at all. It was the moments he wasn't performing. The mornings, the conversations, the ordinary silence that once felt too small for a life built on sound. Because in the end, even the loudest life eventually returns to something quiet. And that is where the truth finally becomes impossible to avoid. That no matter how large the legend grows, it still ends in a human being learning how to live inside time instead of outrunning it.